The scent of his cologne used to be my favorite fragrance in the world. It smelled of security, of success, of the man I had built a life with. Now it made my stomach twist into a cold, hard knot. Darlington stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of our penthouse, his silhouette a stark, dark cutout against the glittering city skyline he loved to command. "The board meeting ran late," he stated, not bothering to turn and face me. His voice was smooth, polished, the same tone he used when charming potential investors. I stood frozen in the doorway of our lavish living room, my fingers still tingling from the cold, hard truth I had discovered hours earlier. His spare phone, the one he thought was so cleverly hidden in the inner pocket of his golf bag, now felt like a brand seared into my memory. The messages I'd seen weren't just flirtatious, they were explicit, planning a future that explicitly, cruelly, did not include me. "Was it productive?" I asked, my own voice surprisingly steady, a small miracle. He finally turned, offering a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Very. We're finalizing the European expansion." He meant the company, but a cold, sickening dread in the pit of my stomach told me he was also talking about his life, a new life with her. I felt the first chilling drops of a reality I had refused to acknowledge for months, maybe years. The perfect, glossy picture of our marriage was cracking, and I was finally allowing myself to see the rot festering just beneath the surface. In the days that followed his chilling non-denial, I became a ghost in my own home. A silent, efficient investigator moving through the opulent, cold spaces we once shared. The initial, gut-wrenching shock slowly hardened into a cold, sharp, and terrifyingly clear resolve. I accessed our shared cloud drive, using a password I'd memorized from a faded sticky note on his desk years ago. He was arrogant, never thinking I would bother to look. There, buried in folders with deliberately bland names like Q3 tax projections and asset management, I found the real truth. It was so much more than a sordid affair. It was a meticulously planned financial demolition. Elaborate spreadsheets, color-coded and precise, detailed the systematic transfer of assets. Assets that came directly from my family's initial, trusting investment in his fledgling startup, into a complex, dizzying web of shell companies with names like Apex Holdings and Meridian Trust. There were records of properties in other states, secret investment accounts, all in his name alone, all funded with money that was legally, if not morally, half mine. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed at 24, a document I'd naively seen as a romantic gesture of our shared future, was in fact his master weapon. He had structured it with diabolical cleverness, so that in the event of a divorce initiated by me for any reason, I would forfeit everything. He was forcing me to stay, trapped in a gilded cage while he systematically plundered my inheritance, or be cast out into the world with nothing but the clothes on my back. The confrontation was inevitable, a storm I had to weather. I chose my battleground carefully, his pristine, minimalist home office, a room that smelled of leather and ambition. I laid printouts of the most damning financial records on his immaculate desk, the incriminating texts from his secret phone displayed prominently on my tablet. For a long, heavy moment, he just stared at them, his face an unreadable, impassive mask. Then he laughed. It was a short, harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet room. "I wondered when you'd finally start snooping," he said, leaning back in his expensive leather chair, the king of his crumbling castle. There was no denial, no apology, not even a flicker of shame. "You've seen the prenup, Selina. If you file for divorce, you get nothing, not a cent. If you try to fight me on these finances, my lawyers will bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again. You have no independent income. You have no proof I coerced you into signing anything." He stood up, walking around the desk to loom over me, using his height as he always did in negotiations. "Your choice is simple. Stay, play the happy, devoted wife in public, and you can keep your comfortable, pampered life, or leave and become a nobody." The cruelty was so calculated, so clean and emotionless, it stole the very air from my lungs. He had not just betrayed me. He had built a legal fortress around his betrayal, and he was utterly confident that I, the quiet, supportive wife, could never hope to breach it. In the profound, deafening silence that followed his ultimatum, a new version of me began to form in the wreckage. It was not born of hysterical rage or desperate tears, but of a cold, clinical, and terrifying fury. He thought he held all the power because he controlled the money and manipulated the law. But he had forgotten who I was before I became Mrs. Darlington Carter. He had forgotten the years I spent in a university research lab, my name on published papers about complex neurological pathways. He saw my quiet, observant nature as weakness, my intelligence as a quaint hobby. He didn't know about Isabel. Dr. Isabel Jacobs, my former colleague and most trusted friend who had held my hand through my mother's final illness and who I had supported unconditionally when a malicious lawsuit threatened to destroy her career. He had always dismissed her as part of my sentimental past. That arrogance was his fatal flaw. I would use the very things he dismissed, my intellect, my loyalty, my immense capacity for patience, to destroy him. I would create a problem his money and his lawyers couldn't simply make disappear. I would become a burden so heavy, so publicly damning, that his only escape would be to reveal the monstrous, selfish creature he truly was to the entire world. Meeting Isabel felt like stepping into a saner, safer world. We met at a quiet, out-of-the-way botanical garden, the humid air thick with the rich scent of damp earth and blooming orchids. I showed her everything, my hands trembling slightly as I handed her the file. Her face, usually a model of professional calm, shifted through a rapid series of emotions: concern, then dawning horror, and finally, a white-hot, righteous anger. "Selina, this is legally and ethically fraught," she whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the wrought iron mic. "If anyone found out I falsified medical records, my career." "They won't," I said, my voice low and steady, belying the storm inside me. "He's gonna leave me destitute, Izzy. He's stolen from my parents' life savings. The legal system as it stands is his accomplice. I have to operate outside of it." I reminded her of the loan. The one I'd given her with no contract, no questions asked, when her life's work was on the line. This was me, calling in that debt of honor. She looked at me, at the desperate, unwavering determination in my eyes, and her own resolve solidified into something steely. She nodded, a sharp, decisive movement. "What do you need?" she asked. And so, together, in that peaceful garden, we began to design my prison, a medical masterpiece that would ultimately become his undoing. The character of Sick Selina was the most challenging and draining role I had ever undertaken. It began with subtlety, a slow and insidious invasion. A slight, persistent tremor in my right hand, perfected by hours of solitary practice in front of my bathroom mirror, until that looked completely involuntary. I let him catch me struggling to pour a glass of expensive wine, the deep red liquid sloshing over the crystal rim as my hand shook uncontrollably. I complained of persistent, debilitating headaches that left me sensitive to light and sound. I described episodes of blurred vision, of seeing floaters that made reading impossible. I started canceling long-standing social engagements, citing a mysterious, profound fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure. I began a series of consultations with Isabel. She, as a respected and published neurologist, provided the perfect, unimpeachable cover. She ordered a battery of terrifying tests: high-resolution MRIs, painful spinal taps, extensive and exhausting blood work. The results, which she altered with a hacker's precision and a doctor's understanding, all pointed unerringly toward a grim, rare, and aggressively degenerative prion disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Its rapid, unpredictable progression was the perfect camouflage for my performance, its rarity making it less likely to be questioned or second-guessed by other specialists he might try to consult in a panic. The day of the official diagnosis was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I deliberately asked Isabel to call me with the results while Darlington was home, ensuring he would be a captive audience to my performance. I took the call on the landline in the kitchen, my back to him, my body positioned for maximum dramatic effect. I let my body tell the story first, the slow, defeated slump of my shoulders, the hand that flew to my mouth to stifle a perfectly timed sob. When I finally hung up, the receiver clicking into place with a sound of finality, I turned to him. My eyes were wide with a terror that was only half feigned. The other half was the fear of my own audacity. "It's CJD," I whispered, my voice cracking convincingly on the ominous acronym. "Isabel says it's a rapid progression variant. There's no cure, no treatment, just palliative management." I watched his face, searching for a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with, for any sign of human compassion. What I saw was a rapid, cold calculation. His eyes didn't soften with grief or fear for me. They narrowed with sharp, clinical assessment. He didn't move to hold me, to offer a comforting word. He stood frozen, a statue of self-interest, and his first question, delivered with chilling pragmatism, was, "What is the financial projection for this management?" The last vestige of my hope for him, for us, died in that moment. The performance was no longer just a performance. It was a necessary, brutal excavation of the ugly truth that had always been there. My decline was a meticulously planned and executed descent into helplessness. Isabel provided me with sophisticated placebo pills designed to mimic the brutal side effects of powerful experimental drugs, debilitating nausea, vertigo, and a pervasive cognitive fog. I leaned into these symptoms with the dedication of a method actor. I began to slur my words slightly in the evenings, claiming the exhaustion of the day made it hard for my tongue to form complex sentences. I developed a slight, unsteady gait, often leaning heavily on furniture for support, my movements hesitant and uncertain. The vibrant, socially adept wife he needed for his corporate fundraising events was gone, replaced by a frail, unpredictable, and deeply embarrassing liability. I saw the frustration and simmering anger growing in him day by day. The official-looking invoices from Isabel's clinic for specialist consultations and experimental infusion therapies began to arrive in the mail, each one a staggering, heart-stopping amount. I watched him study them, his jaw tightening, his eyes darkening with every digit. He started working, later and later, and the scent of an unfamiliar, cheap floral perfume clinging to his jacket became a constant, pungent reminder of the life he was actively living outside the increasingly somber and oppressive walls of our home. The climax of my physical deception was a carefully staged crisis designed to push him over the edge. I planned a dramatic fall down the last 3 steps of our grand, sweeping staircase. The stumble was theatrical, but the impact was real and painful, leaving me with vivid, purple bruises and a convincingly harrowing story of head trauma and confusion. An ambulance was called, its lights painting our elegant foyer in frantic pulses of red and blue. In the emergency room, under Isabel's carefully orchestrated supervision, I underwent a battery of scans. She presented the results to Darlington with a face of grim, unassailable finality in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital hallway. "The disease is accelerating at an alarming rate, Darlington," she told him, her voice low and serious. "The latest scans show significant irreversible deterioration. She's going to need full-time professional nursing care soon. We're looking at a specialized long-term facility. The cost will be astronomical." I lay in the stark hospital bed, feigning a semi-conscious state, watching him through my barely parted lashes. He stared at the MRI of my perfectly healthy brain as if it were his own life sentence. He didn't see a suffering human being. He saw a bottomless financial pit and the utter annihilation of his carefully curated image. The man who valued control above all else was losing it completely. And I, the wife he considered a pawn, was the cause. The divorce papers arrived 1 week after I was discharged from the hospital. He didn't even have the decency to serve them himself. A bored-looking process server handed them to me at my own front door. I brought them to the living room, my hands trembling with a genuine, boiling mix of fury and triumphant satisfaction. The document itself was a masterpiece of cold-hearted legal precision. It cited my terminal and debilitating illness as an irreconcilable difference, coldly claiming it had destroyed the fundamental marital bond. It ruthlessly invoked the predatory prenuptial agreement, offering a one-time, insultingly small settlement that was a mere fraction of a single year's fake medical bills. When he came home that evening, I was waiting for him, the papers laid out on the coffee table like an accusation. "Why, Darlington?" I asked, letting my voice waver with a brokenness that was, in that moment, no longer an act. He looked at me, his expression one of pure, unadulterated relief, as if he were finally shedding a heavy, unwanted skin. "I'm sorry, Selina," he said, the words empty and hollow as a drum. "But the truth is, I divorced you the minute you got sick. I can't be shackled to this tragedy. I have a future to think about." He truly, genuinely believed he was justified. He was handing me the final crucial piece of my puzzle, and he was too blinded by his own selfishness to have any idea. I hired a lawyer, Clara Mikeson, a razor shark in a designer suit, who was secretly a close, trusted friend from my college days. Together, we mounted a fierce, public, and emotionally charged legal battle. We fought passionately for a larger settlement, for lifelong alimony, for him to be legally forced to pay for my astronomical ongoing care. We played the part of the desperate wronged wife to absolute perfection, our performances filled with tears and righteous indignation. This public fight was the final, essential ingredient. It forced Darlington to openly and on the legal record defend his despicable position. His legal team was predictably brutal, dragging my fabricated medical records through the mud, arguing that my deteriorating mental state made me an unreliable witness and a financial black hole. They submitted affidavits from hired-gun medical experts who cynically questioned the necessity and cost of my prescribed care. The entire process was a grotesque public spectacle, and Darlington was the starring villain, proudly displaying his callousness for the legal record and anyone else who was watching. I secretly recorded every meeting, every tense phone call. I saved every email where his lawyers, with his explicit blessing, argued that he should not be held financially responsible for his dying wife. I was patiently, methodically gathering the rope, and he was happily, arrogantly fashioning the noose with his own words and actions. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a seismic, fundamental shift within myself, as if my very soul were realigning. In the sterile, impersonal courthouse, I signed the final papers with a feigned, trembling hand, playing the defeated, hopeless invalid for one last crucial audience of lawyers and clerks. Darlington signed his name with a quick, triumphant flourish, his pen scratching against the paper. He didn't even glance my way. I was already a ghost to him. He shook his lawyer's hand, a smug smile of victory playing on his lips. He was free. He believed he had successfully navigated the inconvenient shipwreck of his first marriage and was now clear to sail into the sunset with his unscathed fortune and his uncomplicated mistress. I waited until his figure disappeared through the courthouse's heavy, revolving doors. Then I stood up. The slight, pathetic stoop in my posture straightened into a spine of steel. The vague, unfocused look in my eyes sharpened into a gaze of pure, undiluted intent. I looked at Clara, and a slow, cold, victorious smile spread across my face, the first real smile I had felt in over a year. The long, patient hunt was finally over. It was time for the reckoning. My first act of absolute Jacobson was deeply symbolic. I checked into a luxurious boutique hotel under my maiden name, a name I hadn't used in a decade. I took a long, scalding shower, scrubbing away the last lingering psychic scent of sickness, submission, and betrayal. Then I dressed in a simple, powerful black outfit that fit the new me and got to work. The digital trap had been prepared for months in the background. I launched the website, The Cure: How I Faked an Illness to Expose a Sociopath. It was clean, professional, and devastatingly effective in its simplicity. I spent the next 48 hours in a focused, almost manic frenzy, editing the mountain of accumulated evidence into a clear, compelling, and chronological narrative. I created seamless video compilations from my hidden recordings. Darlington coldly stating he'd divorced me the minute I got sick. Him laughing with Sarah about my deterioration, his voice full of contempt. I scanned the legal documents where he fought to give me nothing. I built a detailed, interactive timeline, juxtaposing my fabricated symptoms with his very real affair and his meticulously documented financial maneuvers. It was a prosecutor's dream. A story of epic betrayal told not with hysterical emotion, but with cold, irrefutable, digital proof. D-Day was a Tuesday. I chose it deliberately. It was the day of his company's high-stakes quarterly board meeting. I dressed in a bold, crimson dress, a color of power, vitality, and blood that I had banished from my wardrobe during my year of performance. A photographer friend took new, professional headshots, images of a woman who was vibrantly alive, fiercely intelligent, and resolute. One of these powerful images became the banner for the Bet website. At 8:55 a.m., my finger hovered over the send button. The email was addressed to a meticulously curated list, his entire family, every single contact at his firm from the mailroom interns to the board of directors, all our mutual friends, his golf partners, his old fraternity brothers, and of course, Sarah. The subject line was simple and devastating. The truth about Darlington Carter. The body was brief and elegant. For the past year, you have known me as a dying woman. The illness was a performance, designed to reveal the sickness that was already there. I included the link. I took a deep, steadying breath and launched the torpedo. Then I turned off my phone, ordered a pot of strong black coffee, and waited for the world I had known to explode. The silence was profound for exactly 12 minutes. Then, my secure laptop chimed with the first notification from the website's back-end analytics dashboard. Views were skyrocketing, the map lighting up with hits from all over the country. Minutes later, my private, encrypted line, known only to Clara and Isabel, rang. It was Isabel, her voice breathless with a mix of panic and exhilaration. "Selina, it's happening. My phone is blowing up. They're horrified. They're forwarding the link everywhere." I calmly logged into a secondary email account I had set up specifically for the fallout. Dozens of messages were already pouring in. Expressions of stunned support, apologies for their blindness, and sheer, unadulterated outrage. Then came the screenshots. A social media post from his own sister. "I have no brother. My heart is with Selina." A leaked internal memo from his company's HR department, warning staff not to discuss the ongoing situation with the media. The most satisfying was a forwarded email from Darlington himself, sent from his corporate account just 25 minutes after my blast. The subject was, "You psychotic bitch!" The body was a rambling, panicked Jacobs full of empty legal threats and desperate, pleading demands to take the site down immediately. I didn't respond. He was no longer my problem. He was a public spectacle, and the main show was just beginning. By lunchtime, the story had metastasized from private inboxes to the voracious public domain. A prominent business journalist I had discreetly tipped off days earlier ran an exclusive detailed article under the headline, "Venture Capital Titan Exposed in Elaborate Sick Wife Sting." The article was balanced, but included direct, damning quotes and evidence pulled directly from the website. It went viral within the hour, shared by thousands. Financial news networks picked it up, their pundits gravely discussing the corporate governance and ethical implications. His company's stock price began a steep, sickening dive, wiping millions from its market capitalization in a matter of hours. The board of directors, facing a massive shareholder revolt and a PR nightmare of epic proportions, issued a terse, cowardly statement announcing that Darlington Carter was taking an immediate and indefinite leave of absence. It was a corporate death knell. His professional reputation, the gleaming edifice he had spent his entire adult life building, was crumbling into dust in real time, live for the whole world to see. He was becoming a hashtag, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and over coffee, the villain in a story where I was the undisputed architect of his downfall. The social and personal annihilation was swift, merciless, and absolute. My phone buzzed incessantly with screenshots from private group chats and social media feeds, where people I had once considered his staunchest allies were now publicly eviscerating him. His coveted membership at the prestigious Metropolitan Club was summarily revoked. The charities he used as networking opportunities and for photo ops quietly, swiftly removed his name from their donor walls and letterhead. But the most poetic, satisfying justice came from an unexpected source. Sarah. In a frantic, transparent attempt to salvage her own reputation and career, she gave a tearful, carefully stage-managed interview to a popular online news outlet. She painted herself as a naive victim, profoundly manipulated by a powerful narcissist, who had painted me as unstable, cold, and calculating. He told me their marriage was a hollow business arrangement, a facade, she claimed, providing curated text messages that ironically corroborated her story and further damned him. While her own morality was deeply questionable, her public testimony was the final, decisive nail in Darlington's social coffin, providing an independent insider's view of his profound deception and cruelty. The allies he had counted on, the friends he drank with, the colleagues he mentored, they all vanished into thin air, terrified of the toxic fallout that now surrounded his name. With Clara leading the charge with ferocious glee, we initiated our legal counteroffensive, the one I had always planned for. We filed a massive civil suit for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and to have the prenuptial agreement overturned due to duress and his demonstrated fraudulent intent. Our evidence was no longer a private, hidden matter. It was global public record, accessible to anyone with an internet connection. The audio recordings, the financial documents, the entire sordid chronological chronicle was now available for any judge, jury, or curious member of the public to see. His legal team, once so aggressive, confident, and dismissive, was now scrambling, their own professional reputations on the line. They immediately began pushing for a quiet, private, and undoubtedly generous settlement. The man who had vowed to leave me destitute and broken was now desperate to give me whatever I wanted, to make the entire nightmare stop. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been utterly, completely pulverized. I held the detonator, and he was now begging for mercy from the smoldering rubble of the life he had built on lies. He ambushed me at a quiet, secluded cafe a week later. I had been half expecting it. He looked like a ghost of his former self, unshaven, his eyes hollow and desperate, his usually immaculate, expensive suit wrinkled and stained. "Selina," he begged, his voice a ragged, broken whisper. He smelled of cheap whiskey and despair. "Please, you have to call it off. You have to stop this. My career is finished. My family has publicly disowned me. I have nothing left." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my peppermint tea, letting him stand there in his profound humiliation, a spectacle of his own making. "It was just business," he pleaded, a pathetic, hollow echo of his earlier heartless justification. "The finances, the strategy, the divorce, it was all just business." I finally met his desperate, pleading gaze, my own utterly calm and clear. "I know," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the ambient noise of the cafe. "And this is mine. The difference is, my business is now concluded. Yours is a perpetual, chapterless bankruptcy." I stood, gathered my purse, and walked away without a backward glance, leaving him standing alone and exposed in the middle of the bustling cafe, a living monument to his own Jacobs and my ruthless victory. There was no pleasure in it, only a profound, quiet, and absolute sense of closure. The final settlement was officially finalized a month later, behind the closed doors of a mediator's office. The specific terms remained confidential, as per the agreement, but the results were plain for anyone to see. Darlington was forced to sign over the deed to our penthouse, the title to the vacation home in Aspen, and liquidate the vast majority of his personal investment portfolio, transferring the assets directly to me. The prenuptial agreement was formally torn up by the courts, deemed legally unenforceable due to his demonstrable bad faith and fraudulent conduct. The money my family had originally invested was returned to a trust in my name, with significant punitive interest added. He was left with the hollowed-out shell of his crippled company, which he was forced to resign from in disgrace shortly after. I heard through the withered grapevine that he moved to another country, a phantom trying to outrun the long, dark shadow of his own infamy. He was no longer Darlington Carter, the rising star of the venture capital world. He was a permanent, shameful entry in the public ledger of karmic justice. A man who had been given everything and lost it all because he fatally underestimated the quiet, cunning woman he had vowed to love and cherish. In the profound and echoing quiet that followed the storm, I had to slowly, painstakingly rediscover who I was. My teeth, the layers of wife, victim, and avenger. The woman who had been entirely fueled by vengeance was gone, her purpose fulfilled. I sold the cold, empty penthouse, exorcising the last physical ghost of that suffocating life. I traveled the world, not as Darlington Carter's decorative arm candy, but as my own, independent person. I backpacked through the chaotic, vibrant streets of Southeast Asia, learned to make fresh pasta from a nonna in a small Italian village, and sat in absolute mindful silence for days at a remote monastery in the Himalayas. The world, which had felt for so long like a gilded, inescapable cage, was now a vast, beautiful, and thrilling playground. I learned to make decisions, both big and small, based solely on what I wanted, not on what was expected of me. I reconnected with old, true friends, the ones who had loved me long before I ever became Darlington Carter's wife. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and often lonely rebirth. I was learning, for the first time since I was a young girl, what it meant to be simply, wholly, and unapologetically Selina. But a life built only on personal pref. Jacobson and solitary travel began to feel strangely incomplete, like a song with only one note. The searing transformative pain of my experience demanded a greater purpose, a legacy that would outlive my own anger. Using a substantial portion of the financial settlement, I founded the Phoenix Trust, a comprehensive nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal aid, confidential financial planning, and compassionate psychological support for individuals trapped in financially and emotionally abusive marriages. I went public as its founder and primary key factor, putting my name and my story squarely behind its mission. I gave interviews, not to relive the dramatic details, but to offer a practical, strategic blueprint for survival. I spoke about financial literacy, about the importance of protecting oneself legally before a crisis, and about the incredible, formidable strength that can be found in quiet, patient, strategic planning. The woman who had so convincingly faked helplessness was now a recognized, powerful advocate for empowerment. My story, which began as a deeply personal quest for vengeance, had become a lifeline and a source of hope for thousands of others. My victimhood was no longer a defining label. It was a hard-won credential that gave my mission its fierce urgency and its profound, real-world credibility. Life, in its strange and wonderful symmetry, eventually brought a new, healthy love into my world. A man named Mike, the journalist who had written one of the more empathetic and nuanced pieces about my story, reached out a year later to interview me for a follow-up feature on the success of the Phoenix Trust. What was supposed to be a 1-hour professional meeting turned into a 3-hour conversation that spilled into dinner, which then unfolded into a lifetime of shared respect and deep affection. He was intrigued not by the salacious scandal, but by the strength, strategic mind, and profound resilience behind it. Our relationship was built, brick by brick, on a foundation of absolute, unshakable transparency. He knew every dark, cunning, and difficult detail of my past. He had seen all the evidence, heard the recordings, and understood the calculated long-term plan. And he saw not a manipulator, but a survivor who had used her wits, her courage, and her resources to escape a predator when all other doors were slammed in her face. It wasn't a dramatic, all-consuming, passionate inferno like my first marriage had been. It was a deep, steady, reassuring, and equal partnership. It was a love that felt, finally, like coming home to a safe harbor, not gearing up for a daily battlefield. I sometimes catch myself wondering what Darlington would think if he could see my life now. Not the broken, sick woman he so callously cast aside, but the woman confidently presiding over a growing, influential philanthropic empire, secure and cherished in a loving, honest marriage, surrounded by a chosen family of genuine, loyal friends. My very existence is a living, breathing, daily refutation of his entire hollow worldview. He believed my quietness was weakness, so I became a powerful, public voice for the silenced. He saw me as a financial drain, so I built a lasting legacy of financial empowerment for others. He thought money and status were the ultimate prizes in life, but I found true, enduring wealth in purposeful work and profound inner peace. His attempt to destroy me was, in the end, the violent, necessary catalyst for my greatest creation, my authentic self. The revenge was never truly in his public shaming or financial ruin. It is, and always will be, in my unassailable, private, and deeply felt joy. The best revenge is not just a life lived well, but a life that actively mends the brokenness he represents. A life that turns poison into medicine. To anyone who hears my story and feels a spark of chilling recognition in their own life, who sees the shadow of a Darlington in their own partner, know this. I am not advocating for deception as a first or casual resort. I am advocating for intelligent, strategic survival. When you are faced with an opponent who does not fight with honor, who uses the rules of the system as a cudgel against you, you must be prepared to think differently, to operate on a level they cannot comprehend. Your pain can be a potent, powerful fuel, but you must channel it into a focused, precise engine, not a wild, destructive fire that consumes you too. Use it to power your escape, to illuminate the path out of the darkness, not to burn down your own sanctuary in the process. My story is not a blueprint for chaos or petty vengeance. It is a testament to the undeniable power of strategic, intelligent reclamation of one's own life and destiny. It is proof that the pen, the plan, and the patient, disciplined mind are ultimately mightier than the sword of brute financial force or legal manipulation. If you take one thing from my long and painful journey, let it be this: your mind is your most sovereign, unassailable territory. Nurture it, arm it with knowledge, feed it with truth, and trust its cunning, its unique intelligence, even when your heart is shattered into 1,000 pieces. Have the immense courage to play the long, patient game, even when every fiber of your being screams for a swift, messy, and ultimately futile confrontation. True, lasting victory is not a momentary, explosive triumph. It is the quiet, enduring, and profound peace that comes from knowing you strategically and intelligently outmaneuvered your oppressor with the very faculties they so arrogantly dismissed. Forge your searing pain into a precise, deliberate plan. Let your relentless survival become your ultimate, unshakable strength. And when you finally, triumphantly cross the finish line, do not look back at the smoldering ruins of their reputation with hatred or bitterness, but with the quiet, sober acknowledgement of a harsh, necessary lesson learned. Then turn your face to the sun, breathe the sweet, free air into your lungs, and walk, unburdened and forward, into the life you were always destined to claim. A life built not on the shaky foundation of revenge, but on the resilient, solid ground of your own hard-won, unshakable peace. Now, go build it.